Well, just when you think you've heard the worst about the IRS, there is this. The tax agency paying out more than $6 billion in child tax credits last year alone to people who didn't deserve it, and the agency is blaming it on the budget cuts. Sabrina, you're blaming it on something else.
Yeah, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, I just can't believe that we continue to hear these stories every single week, whether we're talking about Jonathan Gruber or Secretary Sebelius. Now it's the Inspector General putting the blame on the American people for messing up their tax returns, when in fact we have a tax system that is so convoluted and so big that even the most intelligent among us are going to mess up from time to time. This is, I find this to be the sort of government hubris.
And Rick, look at the mess-up rate, if you will. The bogus credits were given out 25 to 30% of the time. That's a huge failure rate.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure the Inspector General was blaming people for being stupid or something. People do make mistakes on their taxes. It doesn't make them dumb, doesn't make them bad. I've made a mistake on my taxes. Of course, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. But look, it's a very simple thing. If you want to be able to find people who make mistakes or purposely try and defraud the government, you need audits to do it. Of course the government's going to pay out this money if they don't audit it. They're going to believe the taxpayer.
But, Steve, the point is the IRS is now blaming budget cuts. And there are fewer people. There is a little less money. But they've been making these mistakes for 10 years. Not only that, but they somehow find the money to give themselves bonuses during all this.
Yeah, it's the sick government syndrome. The worse you do, the more money they want. And they didn't have budget shortages when they went after conservative organizations, didn't inhibit it from doing that. So this is an agency that should be sharply downsized with a flat tax. Just throw this monstrosity out, start all over, and the IRS can just be a nice collection agency cashing the checks that people gleefully send in because the economy's prosperous and they're paying fewer dollars in the way of taxes.
Mike, you say this is a budget issue, but for a very different reason than Rick thinks it's a budget issue, right?
Yeah, as long as we keep giving the government so much taxpayer money, David, it's going to be very hard to reduce the power of the IRS. And I mean, look, to Sabrina's point, she's absolutely right. When the person who runs the U.S. Treasury can't figure out how much he owes in taxes, it's a little complicated.
Well, it's too complex, and I would say, Bill, it is fundamentally corrupt. When you have an agency complaining they don't have enough money, so they make these huge mistakes on tax credits, and yet they still give themselves bonuses. Bonuses, by the way, that the American people reject by a huge majority. I think it's, 70% of the people disapprove of those bonuses.
I blame the tax writing committees on Congressional Hill. The problem is the complexity of the tax code, just like Steve says. You know, this is supposed to be a credit for middle income and lower middle income people. In order to claim it, you have to plow through instructions that relate to Section 1256 straddle contracts by options dealers and the exclusion of income from American Samoa. Yeah. This is absurd.
It's nuts. And Sabrina, there's another, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because the new immigration action, the executive action of the president, is going to entitle a whole lot of people who used to be illegal here to child tax credits.
Right, and this takes us back to earlier in the show when we were talking about the real risk of big government. It's because as everybody wants something and the government begins to incentivize or disincentivize through the tax code. Anyone who has taken one step into any government agency knows that there are plenty of areas where we can cut. It's not rocket science, as I always say. This is just a little bit of common sense.
And Rick, there are billions, this tax credit division, if you will, of the IRS. It's not only child tax credits, also the earned income tax credit. It's very poorly functioning. They have huge error rates. Doesn't it just show that the tax system is too complex? We just got to simplify the whole thing.
I don't think you'd find much of anybody who would not agree with your statement.
Including you.
Including me. It is too complex. And by the way, for the record, I'm also an American who does not think there should be bonuses getting paid. Your bonus comes when you get that cushy job in the private industry after you leave the IRS. But I just, you know, you got to keep in mind that you have to have audits. Even under a flat tax, there will be people who will cheat. And the only way you can catch them is if we audit.
Well, I don't think we mind audits, Steve. The problem is the IRS is blaming the cuts in their budget when they're spending money on investigating conservatives and giving themselves bonuses.
Sure. In the real world, if you have an $11 or $12 billion budget, you'd use high tech and figure how to do it out. And in terms of audits, yes, with a flat tax, you could do it very easily with $1 billion.
Okay. Last word from the boss coming up. 1 in 5 Americans fear they'll be buried in debt until they go to the grave. Our